Welcome to Krassencast. Today we have a very special guest, Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO and National Director of the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, of course. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you so much for having me.
So today we want to focus on a few main topics. I think it's important that we do address Elon Musk, address the X platform, and then we'll move on to some other topics around anti-Semitism, colleges, and a few other things. Is
Great.
that okay? Sound good?
Terrific.
So we all know that Elon Musk has said some things that could be viewed as controversial. Obviously, when he endorsed posts, if you want to call it that, on X, there's a lot of Jewish people who would say that he shouldn't have said the things he has said. At the same time, though, I think Musk has taken actions to try and stop anti-Semitism, or at least, show that it's a problem. He's met with the Israeli prime minister. He's met with the Israeli minister in combating anti-Semitism. I think he's talked with you guys. So I think, there's these two sides. People are saying, oh, Elon Musk is anti-Semitic. Others are saying, oh, that's ridiculous. He's obviously not. I think it's something to talk about. I think it's something that's important to talk about.
Sure. Well, so let me set the record straight in a few ways, if I could, Ed. So number one, I don't think Elon Musk is an anti-Semite. He's just not. I've talked to him enough times directly. I've listened to what he said, privately. I've listened to what he said publicly. I don't think he's an anti-Semite, period. I will say that X has some of the same issues that other social media services have, which is we see how extremists exploit it. By the way, extremists on both sides of the spectrum. And so we have called that out when it has happened. I would also say that he has re-platformed some people on X whose views I find odious, who violated the terms of service in the past. And I think they continue to behave, I would say, in a manner that's violative of the terms of service of the platform. And these are not only right-wing extremists. You've got, hardened left-wing radicals, anti-Semites, other intemperate voices there too. But I think my job isn't to psychoanalyze Elon Musk. I don't think my job is to try to intuit what's in his head. I think my job is to criticize when I think the company gets it wrong and to credit when I think the company gets it right. And so that's what we do here. Now, that may irritate some people on the right who think I'm too liberal. That may irritate some people on the left who think I'm too conservative. But my goal here is not to play for the red team or the blue team. It's to call balls and strikes on anti-Semitism, on extremism and hate. And that's what we try to do.
So correct me if I'm wrong. You were part of a coalition that did call for advertisers to pause some of their ads on X. This was, I think, immediately after Musk took over and all those unbannings began. Do you feel that this was the correct decision in hindsight? And is this something you do again?
So a few things. So after the change in management, we had some prior conversations with Elon. He said some things, and then shortly after, some things changed, like getting rid of the trust and safety kind of leadership, like replatforming people who we believed, based on prior conversations, he wasn't going to replatform, and whatnot. And so at that point, ADL joined, I don't know, with scores of other organizations. We were a signatory as part of a much bigger process that we didn't lead, that called for advertisers to reconsider using the platform to, promote their brands. We did do that. But at the same time, as I've said very clearly, we did do that. We did, because we felt like the platform was going in a different direction. We said, brands, you need to be careful about that. And at the same time, Brian, we advertised on Twitter and continued to advertise on Twitter. So our point was, for brand safety, we didn't know where it was going, because again, we were very unclear based on what management was saying. And at the same time, we kept using it and we kept advertising on it. And so my view but we never made emails about it, sent emails about it, made phone calls about it, conducted meetings on it, nothing of the sort. My view is always that advertisers need to make their own decisions. I still stick to that position today. So in terms of your question, it's hard for me to think through, like to answer a hypothetical, but like here and now, we think X has great utility to reach certain audiences, to communicate certain messages. And there remains, we've seen some very encouraging signs, and we continue to see some worrying trends. So we're, very engaged in participating on the platform to try to help them get it right.
I think there's a line, right? There has to be a line between free speech and hate speech somewhere. And I think certain people want to make it more toward free speech, and others want to make it toward, we have to remove some of this hate speech. So
Well,
do you feel like we're in a good spot, like what Elon Musk is doing with X?
well, it's funny because what I would say, Eddie, is a little different. So I actually think that hate speech is the price of free speech. Like, I don't believe in safe spaces. This is like very in vogue on college campuses. I believe in brave spaces. That's what I think. I think what's different, though, is freedom of speech is not the freedom to slander people, like ad hominem attacks. Freedom of expression isn't the freedom to incite violence against people and to call for genocide and whatnot. It just isn't. And so by those kind of very simple standards, I think you can say, look, you can say awful, detestable things that might make me recoil, but like that's what it means to live in a democracy. So I don't think it's for me to censor or any of us to censor people, but at the same time, I think people, again, who slander, who incite violence, that isn't protected by First Amendment standards. So I think those people can choose to engage in that behavior. The question is whether you're a social media platform or a traditional media platform, whether you want to give those people the privilege of using your service. So if you slander and incite violence, typically you can't show up in prime time on CNN, and you can't typically write an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. And so I guess, notice I didn't say the New York Times, because you actually can publish op-eds in the New York Times calling for genocide against Jews.
Yeah.
But I just think that's a question, not just for Elon, but for all these companies, for TikTok, for Insta, for Facebook, for Snap, so I think we need to ask ourselves, why are they privileging voices who say such prejudiced things?
I just want to touch on something I talked to Musk about in a space, I guess a couple of weeks ago. We discussed when is that line crossed, and his line is when it becomes illegal. Is that a fair line to draw?
Well, look, slander is not a violation of I don't think, actually, I'm not a lawyer. Are you guys lawyers?
No.
I'm not, but I think some states have it. It's illegal to slander
I'm not
someone.
sure if it's a violation of the criminal code, but
I believe in some states it is, but it's never prosecuted.
Yeah, so I think there should be I don't think that, I think that threshold's a little too high. Like, again, if I slander you, Ed, you could sue me. You could seek civil damages. Now, because of Section 230, X, like the other social media companies, is exempt from any liability. But nonetheless, if you go on CNBC and you slander me, I can sue you. And that's germane, because I think, in my mind, that's a very reasonable standard for social media companies too. You shouldn't allow slander.
But who would be the arbiter of that? Like, who says what is slander and what isn't, if you have two sides competing?
It's true. But like, you could have a very robust system, Brian, where I flag something, I explain why it's flagged, and then you could have, whether you're using AI and technology to enhance it or using people to make value judgments, you could have a robust process to deal with this. And by the way, I'll be very honest. I mean, the companies we're talking about, not just X. Again, think about Facebook, which is orders of magnitude bigger. They have ample resources that they could put towards this. They just choose not to. TikTok, I mean, they have extraordinary resources that they could use to try to tackle this problem. They choose not to. I would like to see the companies prioritize how they use their own incredible capabilities of innovation to tackle this problem, Brian. Because, like, it's hard. I mean, I don't know what the daily user stats are. Daily active users on X these days. Do you have an idea what they are?
I think it's 500 million, 550 million monthly active.
So like, you know, it's hard creating a product that 500 million people use actively every month. That's hard. You know, it's not hard, like knocking off the Nazis, right? Or like the people who want to call for genocide. So while I appreciate your point, which, well, how do we decide? I think that I would love to see the companies prioritize addressing this with the same energy that they address monetization or they address, you know, other, you know, areas for improvement.
Yeah, I've noticed personally. So I've been on Twitter for 13 years or something.
Yeah.
And before Musk took over, I noticed there was anti-Semitism directed towards me being Jewish. I have a last name, right? That people say I'm Jewish, right?
Right.
When Musk came back, I did notice an uptick in anti-Semitism directed towards me initially after those people were unbanned and that flow of new people who were banned came back on. I did notice though, as the months wore on and they began to implement various initiatives like community notes, like the better sensitive content approach that they've added, the whole freedom of speech, not freedom of reach thing, X premium verification, stuff like that. I do notice that I actually see less anti-Semitism directed towards myself, and I'm just one person, than I did prior to Musk's takeover now. So
Right.
I do feel like things have improved drastically over the last 12 months. Have you noticed that at all? Like, is that
So there's two things that you're kind of alluding to. There's what do you notice anecdotally, and then what do you
right?
detect empirically, right? So I can't speak for the way Media Matters or CCDH does their analyses, and I won't try to represent what they do because I don't
Okay.
know. What I will say is that, and that's not to disparage them, by the way. I just don't know. I don't know what their methodology was, so I'm not knocking them at all. I'll just say that anecdotally, I don't think I see a material decrease in anti-Semitism. And empirically, based on what we're able to study, I'm not sure that we've observed that either. Now, and in fact, again, there are a lot of intemperate voices there, Brian, that just weren't there a year or a year and a half ago. So what I would say is that it's still a work in progress. And my view is, and I think you've heard me say this before, like at ADL, we try very hard not to, we don't believe in this sort of dictum of cancel culture. I think it's toxic. We believe in counsel culture. So if you get it wrong, I think our job should not be to push you away. I think it's our responsibility to pull you in. You get it wrong, I believe our approach should be to try to help you get it right. And you know, for what it's worth with Elon, like that's what we've seen repeatedly. Like he gets it wrong, and then we engage with him, and then he tries to get it right. And I think that's worthwhile. And acknowledging that we're all flawed, none of us are perfect. We're all like, hopefully, on a path of trying to do better. And I just think that's good. Now, look, in fairness, there are some people who have zero interest in self-improvement. There are some people who don't have any humility and think, you know, it's okay to call for genocide. I think it's okay to, you know, really repeatedly, serially defame and delegitimize a group of people. And so you can't exercise counsel culture with everyone, but that's what we try to do. Because at the end of the day, look, if Twitter is better for its Jewish users, it's better for all users and it's better for the world. And I just like, I'm a capitalist here. Like, I don't want to bankrupt Twitter. I don't want to ban other platforms. My goal is to do what I can to do the small. I mean, look, we're just a nonprofit over here, but if we can do our part to make them better, that's, I think, a good contribution.
So, do you believe that Musk has taken the appropriate action in regards to some of the posts he made about the Jewish community?
Yeah,
I,
I
I
think,
know there's that one post where he replied and said that's the actual truth. Do you think he's done the right thing there?
look, that was very problematic. And then he immediately qualified it. And by the way, as you probably saw, Ed, he went after ADL. He was like, guys are the problem. Not all the Jews, just the ADL. Look, the truth is that I've seen him publicly and talk to him privately and know that he's trying to do better. That's true.
So are you
I think he's
planning
done
to work
enough.
with
I think
him
he still needs to
more?
do more, Ed. I think he still needs to do more.
Yeah.
I think this is still a journey, and I'd like to see them do more. But I'm encouraged by what I've heard him say, and I hope he'll continue to try to improve it. And
I think he takes criticism pretty well. For
yeah,
for
when
the
it's offered
position he has.
I think when it's offered constructively, I think he doesn't take
Right.
it well to ad hominem attacks, and who does? I don't. I don't like that. But I think he appreciates it when you approach him with a desire to try to help him do better.
So I want to shift away from X, which I'm sure you're probably happy about. So the war in the Middle East has definitely sparked all sorts of attacks, especially on Zionists, but in ways that I see as being anti-Semitic. Is it at all possible to be anti-Zionist and not anti-Semitic?
So here's what I would say about that. So number one, since the massacre committed by Hamas on October the 7th, I think everything has changed. And yet some things that we knew before are now even more clear. So to that end, one of the things that I deeply believe is that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Period. Full stop. So what do I mean by that? Anti-Zionism is this ideology that doesn't call for the establishment of a two-state solution. Anti-Zionism is not about dignity and self-determination for Palestinians. Anti-Zionism is an ideology of negation, which is about denying Jews. I mean, Zionism means the right of Jewish people to self-determination in their ancestral land, a place where Jews have lived for 2,000 years. So anti-Zionism means I don't believe Jews have the right to self-determination in their ancestral land. And so whether or not people mean, and Brian, let's be clear, there are Jewish people who call themselves anti-Zionist.
Yeah.
But whether or not you intend to be anti-Semitic, in my mind, doesn't matter. Because it's not about, you might not intend to be racist, but racism isn't judged by the intent of the perpetrator. Sometimes, but it's about how you experience it as the person who's targeted. So anti-Zionism, whether by intent or by outcome, whether by intent or by impact, is anti-Semitic. Now, I also want to be clear. This is about this fundamental right of Jewish people. Being a Zionist, like I am, like most people are on the planet Earth, whether they realize it or not, doesn't mean you have to support everything the government of Israel does. Being a Zionist doesn't mean you have to support, crazy extremists who want to build settlements in, I don't know, in Amman or in Damascus. Being a Zionist doesn't mean that you support every single action by every Israeli government since time immemorial. It just means you believe Jews have the same rights you want everyone else to have.
It's like saying you're a patriot, but not liking Biden or not liking
Yeah,
Trump.
yeah. Like I am a proud American. That doesn't mean I like everything that Trump did. I know you guys didn't. I'm a proud Zionist. Doesn't mean I like everything Bibi does. I mean, give me a break,
Yeah,
And
I think there's plenty of American Jews who don't agree with everything the Israeli government does, but they do agree that Israel should exist and has the right for self-determinism, right?
totally right. And can you ever imagine? Can you ever fathom a world in which you would ask someone who was ethnically Chinese before you, I don't know, had lunch with them, did a business deal with them, said hello to them on the street, to ask them about what is their opinion about what the Chinese government is doing to the Tibetan minority? Could you ever imagine that kind of litmus test? Or could you ever imagine being so angry, so therefore you think it's okay to go vandalize Panda Express? I mean, but that's what happens to Jews all the time. And this is so again, I am not suggesting that everyone needs to march down Fifth Avenue in the Israel Day Parade. And I am committed. I think the only way Israel has a long-term sustainable future is when it arrives at some kind of peace arrangement with its Palestinian neighbors. This is what I believe. And make sure that the Israeli Arabs in the country continue to enjoy the kind of dignity and rights they have in Israel. Arab Israelis have more rights in Israel than the Jewish minority in any other Muslim country on the planet, not just in the Arab Middle East. So yet at the same time, I don't understand why people think it's not okay to do this to Asian American people or to Black people, but somehow it's always open season on Jews. I think it's despicable.
So we've seen a lot of hate speech, anti-Semitism, extremism on college campuses, especially as of late. Is the ADL doing anything to kind of try and temper down that problem? And what can be done? Like, what's the solution to that?
Super good question. So the ADL tracks anti-Semitic incidents. We've been doing that for almost 45 years. We get reports, we investigate, and then we publish what we verify. Last year, 2022, again, before 10/7, last year was the worst year on record. Again, Biden was the president. Elon Musk only owned Twitter for 2 months, and yet it was the worst year we've ever seen. So I just want to make the point here, Ed, that in context, we were already dealing with elevated levels. And since 10/7, it's exploded. Literally last year, we had about 3,700 incidents. We've had 2,500 in 2 months.
Wow.
So in 2 months, we've had like 3/4 of what happened all of last year. But to get to your question, if this is a hurricane, college campuses are the eye of the storm. There are things that could happen. Number one, we need the worst actors on campus, these groups that intentionally target and victimize Jewish students, that vandalize Hillels, that marginalize Jewish kids. We need them expelled. There should be, like, I believe in council culture, like we said, but there also needs to be consequence culture when you break the law again and again and again. And so there needs to be deterrence established, Ed. So if you violate the code of conduct, there should be discipline, period. So that's number one. Number two, I think that these universities need to recognize if you allow your Jewish students to be discriminated against, you could suffer consequences yourself. So like the federal government can pull back funds. So we created a legal call-in line, gentlemen. In 6 weeks, we've had over 400
Wow.
cases like pitched to ADL from college students or professors, by the way, who are being victimized. We've
Wow.
trained up 250 lawyers. Like, we're going to create an armada of attorneys that are going to demonstrate to these universities that if they can't show accountability, we will force them to. And then finally, I think, look, I am someone who believes in diversity education. I think this is an amazing heterogeneous country, and we benefit from learning about our neighbors, Jewish or Black or Asian or whatever. And yet, the kind of DEI orthodoxy that literally, you talk about inclusion, except for the exclusion of Jews, that's got to be reimagined entirely. The whole thing needs to be re-engineered. So I'm not someone who believes you blow it up and end it. I believe you repair it and fix it. I think it needs a fundamental overhaul to make sure that all people, regardless of where you pray or how you vote or who you love, everybody should be given the same degree of respect, and everyone should be given equal treatment, period, end of story.
I think understanding is important. Understanding one another and getting to know people from a different race, from a different religion, from a different culture is super important, because most of the time you just realize you're just human beings and you have so much more in common than you have different.
Totally. Like, it should be about welcoming people, about sharing opportunity, and about increasing knowledge, not about disincluding people, not about, glorifying the oppressor versus the oppressed or whatever. Like, we need to end the oppression Olympics, period, end of story.
So we're running short on time, so I just want to do one final thing. We do this with all our guests. We ask them this or that. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, so TikTok or X?
X.
Empathy or education?
Empathy.
All right, would you rather have a time machine that can only go back in time, or a time machine that could only go forward in time?
Oof. Backward. Because I would want to save my family who were murdered in the Holocaust.
Good
So
answer.
backwards.
Would you rather have dinner with Martin Luther King Jr. or Nelson Mandela?
Oof. Can I invite them both to brunch at my house?
No, you
Yeah.
got to pick one.
Gotta
So
pick one.
I would probably have dinner with Nelson Mandela. I think he's closer to the moment and could share more with me.
Okay, how about Elon Musk, Donald Trump, or Joe Biden?
Uh,
Dinner date with one of them.
Well, I'd want to have dinner with Joe Biden. He's the president of the United States. That would be mine. He has his hand on the wheel right now. Maybe I would have answered differently 4 years ago. Maybe I answered differently 4 years from now, but today would be Joe Biden.
Final question. Is anti-Semitism a bigger problem on the right or on the left?
I just reject the question. Anti-Semitism,
That's fair.
neither side of the spectrum is exempt from intolerance. And so I think when this like reductive thing, this like Fox, MSNBC, New York Times, like it's so unhelpful. Anti-Semitism is a ubiquitous problem. Right now, the college campuses, it's all coming, that's all the kind of radical anti-Zionist left. And yet we still have problems with the extreme, violent right. We need to have the courage to deal with all of it, irrespective of whether it's coming from the red side or the blue side. We need to do it honestly, openly, and ruthlessly, irrespective of the source.
You gave a really good analogy on PBS. I listened last week, and you said the anti-Semitism on the right is like a hurricane coming at you at full force, but the anti-Semitism on the left is like climate change, where it gradually builds until it gets to a point where it's too late.
Yeah.
I thought that was great.
That is a good analogy.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here. I know you're short on time. We certainly didn't give you softball questions, and you knew this was going to be the case, and you still want to have a dialogue. I commend you for that.
That's very kind of you. Look, I appreciate what you guys do. I mean, I read your stuff on Twitter all the time. Sorry. I read it on X, your posts on X all the time. And I just appreciate your voice, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to chat a little bit today.